Hey, this is Andrew Brown, and what we're going to be doing in this video is creating a front-end JavaScript application using our custom JavaScript framework here called Dilithium.js, which is based off of Mithril.js. If you've never heard of Mithril, it is extremely highly performant web framework here. As you can see, it's extremely fast in terms of performance and download size, and Dilithium is a boilerplate on top of it, so we're also productive while working with this framework. And so we're going to build out a very simple JavaScript front end, and then we're going to also have a Rails backend, and we're going to connect the two so that we know how to build out front-end applications with a Rails application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my terminal here, and I'm going to just create a new Rails application. So here in Sites, it was the folder I like to put things. I'm going to type Rails new my app. And so that's going to generate out a new Rails application. While that is going, I'm going to make a new tab because we're going to have to go install the Dilithium CLI. So I'm just going to go ahead here and go to the Dilithium CLI here. I'm going to copy this link here because I want to globally install this. So I am using MVM. If I do MVM list, I believe I have Node version 12 installed. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do npm install. I'm going to paste the link here and do a -g. -g means to globally install it. And that's going to allow us to use it anywhere we want. And while that's going, I'm going to go back here and I can see my Rails app has finished. So I'm going to type in my app and I'm going to just do a Rails S to make sure that application works. It might complain. Yeah, because it installed Webpacker. So that's done. But what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and open up our Rails application here in Visual Studio Code. Okay, I'm just going to move this terminal off the screen because it'll be a little bit easier if we just work with the terminal in here, okay? And so now that we are in Visual Studio Code, there's a few things I don't want to use. I don't want to use Webpacker because we're not going to need it. We're not going to need TurboLinks, and we're not going to need JBuilder. And so here we should be in the same directory that we need to be in here. So I'm just going to type in Rails S. And that should now start up the application. Great, so we don't have a problem there. We'll make our way back to the browser, and Rails apps always start on localhost 3000, so we'll go ahead and type that in there. And so, yeah, that's the default page. So now we're going to need to get Dilithium installed into this Rails application. So what we're going to do is we're going to split our terminal window here because we're going to need another one. And now we're going to use the Dilithium CLI. So the command to build a new or generate a new Dilithium project is computer begin program. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to type computer begin program, and we'll just call it app here. And so now we have a new directory here. It's generated out a bunch of default files for us. And this is set up to do the Coffeescript and Sass for us. And so right now, like if you're just working with the front end, you could work with the dev server, and we'll just start that up to see what that looks like. But we're going to have to stop using the dev server and integrate it into the Rails app. So what I'm going to do here is now that I've started it, I'm actually going to have to split again. And apparently I can do that, three splits. It's pretty good. Because we're going to need to also watch the server and also run the dev server. So if I just go here into package.json, you're going to see we have this build command. That's when we want to build for production. We have the watch, which we need to run, and we need to run the serve, which is the development server. So I'm going to type in here, we're going to type in, or so we're going to cd into that directory, and then we're just going to type npm run watch, and that should build out our files. You know what, I probably didn't do an npm install there, so we'll do that first. Okay, now we'll just give that a little bit of time here. And while that is going, I'm just going to cd into the correct directory here. And I think while we're waiting for that, we can just start setting up our Rails application. So Rails apps always have a default page. And so what we want to do is override that. So what I'm going to do is make my way to the lib directory, or sorry, the config directory, into routes.rb. Okay, so here in routes.rb, we don't have any routes. And so what I want to do is set up a new page. I'm going to set up our root page. And I want this to go to pages Dilithium. So this isn't a page that we defined yet, but I'm going to type in pages, and we'll type in Dilithium here. So I'll type in DILITHIUM. I don't know why, but it's a hard one for me to spell. I almost always copy it. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make a new directory or new file up under here into my views, and we'll make a new folder here called pages. And in there, we're going to make a new file called Dilithium. Oops. Not what I wanted, but it has the word Dilithium in it, so we'll work with that. And we'll just type in HTML herb. And really, this is just a placeholder. We don't really need to do anything in this particular file. But just to make sure that it's working, I'm just going to put in DI for Dilithium. And we're going to go back and see if our Rails application loads this page. And we don't have a pages controller. That's fair. So we'll go ahead and go make one. So under controllers, I'm going to make a new pages controller here. So we'll just type in pages controller.rb. And we'll just type in pages controller application controller. Okay. And it's going to know by default to render the that page there. So I'll go back here, give this a refresh. And now it's having a problem with turbo links. We're not using turbo links today. We definitely remove that. So what we'll do is just go ahead and remove both of these because we don't need either of these actually right now. I'm going to go ahead back here and refresh. Great. And so there, that page is ready to go. And so now it looks like we've installed all of the dependencies we need for Dilithium here. And so now we'll go ahead and do an npm run watch. And we'll also go ahead and do an npm run serve. And Windows wants me to allow node. I'm going to just say yes. And so here we have the local host, which says port 8080. So I'm going to go make my way back here. And we're going to put in port 8080 here. And this should be rendering out an application. So I'm just going to go ahead and inspect the page. I'm not seeing any errors, which is usually okay. So there shouldn't be an issue here. It doesn't like that there's no CSS, which is totally fine. But we'll go take a look and see what it's complaining about. So what we'll do is go up here to app, and we can just see if anything's been generated out. And right away, I can already see that there is no application CSS and etc. there. So something's up. So what we can do is just maybe make a change to one of our files here and just see if it takes effect. So under our source directory, under style sheets, we have this application SAS file. And maybe if I just hit enter there, we'll just see if it recompiles. And it definitely is recompiling. And we go in the public directory and we're not seeing anything in there. So that makes me think that there's something wrong with my Webpack dev here. So I'm just going to take a peek in here. And you know what it is? It's this. I think I've already fixed this previously. But for whatever reason, it hasn't taken effect here. So I'm just going to go ahead and change that. You might not have to do that, because by the time you watch this video, I would have already corrected that. But we'll go ahead here, and I'm just going to stop that and restart that. And so now, if I go to my public directory, it should generate out there. And so now we have style sheets. Great. And we have that application.js file. So if we make our way back to our localhost 8080 and refresh, there's our JavaScript page there. So let's go take a look at what that looks like. So under our JavaScript directory, we have views, components, layouts. I don't think we use layouts as of just yet, but where all the magic happens is in the routes.coffee. This is actually the first file that is being run. And so we have our routes that are defined, and then we have this route. So this mounts the actual JavaScript application. A lot of other frameworks will call mount. Mithril has the command called mount, but when you use the routes, you don't have to. And so that's what it's loading right now. It's loading this pages home because this URL is matching that. So if we just go ahead and take a look at that, we will open up the views here, pages home. And so this is the file that it's rendering right now. And so if you're wondering what you're looking at right now, this is actually Coffeescript. So that's what we use. If you've never used Coffeescript before, a good example is JS2 Coffee here. I'll just pull this up here. Coffeescript was very popular 6-7 years ago. It still is popular, but a lot of people like different things now, so we're not seeing as much as before. But what Coffeescript is just like a more compressed version of JavaScript. So if I write this here, and we just do console log testing, okay, that's what it's outputting, okay? So if you ever want to play around with it and see how that works, that's how it is. But it is an indent-based language. But you know, if you just follow the steps here, you shouldn't have an issue. This M here is actually for Mithril, and that's how we render out elements. So you know, if you're using React, you're probably used to using JSX. But here we just can use the M stuff, and this is a lot more performant than using JSX or MSX here, and that's why we do it. Paired with Coffeescript, it makes things a lot easy. easier here. So, what I want to do is I want to actually have some data that we can actually use to populate this here, our front end. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and in our Rails application, we'll just set up an API endpoint. And we already know how to do that, right? Because we have another tutorial on that. So what I want to do is create a new namespace, and I'm going to call this namespace API. And within that namespace, I want to just create something new. So maybe we'll just call it tasks. So we'll say resources tasks. And so now what we'll need to do is create ourselves a new controller. So I'm going to go here and make a new file. And we'll say tasks controller .rb. Or actually, sorry, we'll have to make a new folder first. I'm sorry. Called API. And then in here, we're going to make a new file called base controller. It's always a good habit when you have a new namespace to make a base. So this will be API : base controller. This is going to extend application controller. Okay. And then within here, we will go ahead and make the controller we wanted, which was task controller.rb. And that's going to extend the base controller. And I don't think that's right. It should be base, or it's API base. I'm getting a bit mixed up here today. But that looks fine. And so we're just going to make a new index page here. And this 4 indent's going to drive me crazy, so I'm going to change it to 2. There we go. And in here, what I'm going to do is just return some JSON. So I'm just going to fake the data. We don't really need to actually do anything real for this because we really want to focus on the front end here. But you definitely need to know how to attach it to an application. So we'll just do 1, and we're going to say my web application. And we'll say 2 here. My front end, my back end, my UI. Okay, and so we have a little bit of data there. And so what we'll do is, I think we can actually just test this in the browser. So if we go to localhost here, whoops, localhost, and we just say tasks. Sorry, it's API tasks, because that's what we namespaced it. And we have a small complaint here, API based, did you mean? So we'll just flip back here because clearly we have a syntax error. There's no colons here, that's why. Okay, we'll flip back. And so this is returning JSON. So now we have data that our application can use, but I want to have a bit more tighter integrations with this Rails application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take it a step further and actually get it so that the Rails application is rendering out the JavaScript page. So we don't have to have a development server here, okay? So I'm just going to kill my development server. I just did Control-C to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my application HTML herb. This is the main layout here. And what I want to do is I want to render out the JS and CSS file that are respectively in these directories here. And actually, I probably want to put them in the public directory of the Rails app. So that's what we'll do first. So what I want you to do is go to web.dev.js, and we're going to change where this outputs. So here in the output right now, it's going into this current directory. But if we went up one directory, so from public, then we would go to app. So that means it would put it in the app directory. Yeah, but we need to go up one more level because we want to place it into this public directory here. This is where we want it to generate out. So what I'll do is go ahead and just put 2 more dots here. And I believe that should place it where we want to go. And we do have a few things down here. So maybe it was in the right place before. I'm not too sure, but I'm just going to go ahead. Yeah, it really does look like it was in the right place. So maybe before when it was like this, it was actually generating out. Let me just think about that for a moment. No, this would run from the base application. So we would only have to go up one directory. So it already technically is where we need it to be. So that's pretty darn good. And so what I'm going to do is go to application HTML herb here. And what I want to do is I just want to figure out a way to include these. So whenever you want to write like functions in here, that's where we're going to use application helper. So let's make our way over to our helpers directory here. And I'm just going to do include, initial JavaScript. No, I'm going to call it include. Sorry, I'm changing my mind here. We'll call it include JavaScript's tag. Okay, and yeah, it's 2-space. Again, I don't use Visual Studio Code on a day-to-day basis, so I've never bothered to ever set this to 2-space here. And so we're going to want to include that there. So I'm going to do path equals Rails root join. We're going to say public. And in here, we want the application.js. So I'm just going to write application.js here. And from that, what we can do is actually use the JavaScript include tag, which is actually a function for Rails for loading stuff like that. And we're just going to pass it the path. So, I mean, that should work. Technically, we should do a find on it before we do it, but just for the sake of this, we don't need to do that. It's fine. And so I'm going to try to take this here and see if that works. So we'll go back here. And I'm just going to put this here at the bottom here. This is where your JavaScript should go. And we're going to go back here and we'll go to the home. Actually, we don't have we have a home folder, yeah. And so this is still saying DI, and so that makes me think that it's not loading that JavaScript. So we'll load this up here and we'll take a look, and you can see that it's not rendering out anything here, okay? But this is our application HTML HAML, so it should be. But I'm just going to do a sanity check and write testing in here. We're going to give it a refresh and see if that appears. So that is working. And so here, this should be triggering that. So it probably is calling this function here. So what I'm going to just do here is I'm just going to do a sanity check and put path on the end. And that should print out the path to the screen here. And so here you can see that it is providing the absolute path. So, I mean, that should work. So I'm just trying to think here for a moment. Because what we're trying to see is that actual line rendered out, eh? So that's what should be showing up is the actual JavaScript. You know what it probably is? It probably needs like an absolute path. So we don't want all of this. We just want the end of the name here. We just want it to say / because that's probably what it needs. And I'm just going to do a sanity check here. And I'm just going to put in this, which is kind of dirty, but if it works for our case, that's fine. Oops, that's localhost 8080. We don't want that. We want localhost 3000. Okay, so that's going to work. You know what? Let's just make it really easy, and let's just do that, all right? And actually, we'll make it even easier on you. We'll just do this. This is not how I would do it in a production application, but for the sake of this here, we'll just get it to work. Okay. And then we can just forget all about this. And we'll do the same thing for the style sheet. So for style sheets, there's a tag for that. So we'll go here. And we'll just provide what we need to do here. So it should be style sheets. And I believe it's just called application CSS. Okay. And so this looks unstyled to me, and we'll give it a refresh. And it's hugging the border, so definitely both are loaded now. So now the Dilithium application, our JavaScript frontend, is now integrated into our Rails application. So the next thing is actually just to build out something, like display those tasks on the page here. So let's go ahead and do that now. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and I'm going to close this one because we don't need to see that anymore. All right. And we'll just make ourselves a little bit more room. And I think what we'll do is we'll just go ahead back here to our JavaScript directory. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and make a new page called /tasks. Like, I think it's probably prudent that we do something with routing in this video here. So what we'll do is go down to routes. And I'm just going to create a new view. So we'll call this import tasks index from views tasks index. And then in here, we're going to make a new route called tasks. And this is going to be tasks index here. That's great. And so now that we've created this file, we've said we're going to import this file, we have to go ahead and create it. So we'll go ahead and make a new one here. So we'll say new tasks. Did it make the folder? I can't tell. We'll just make a new window here. I can't ever tell with Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to cd into it and create it manually. If you can do it in the side there and you're comfortable with it, that's great. I'm just going to do this very quickly. So I'm going to go to views here, make dir tasks. There we go. I'm just going to touch a new file there in tasks called index.coffee. And I'm just going to flip back here. And so now if I go to my views, I should have a tasks directory. Great. And we'll go ahead and make ourselves a new task. I don't always remember these off the top of my head, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this from our pages home. And we will paste this in here. And what we'll do is we'll just call this tasks index because that is what it is called. And we'll just say tasks index. We'll go back to our home page and we'll just say my home page. And what we'll do is we'll go back to our actual routes for our Rails here. So we'll go back to config. We're going to go to our routes.rb. And we're going to need one for that get page. So I'm just going to say tasks. And we're just going to point that to go to pages Dilithium. Okay, so that's just so that when I type in here, it's going to load that page, which loads our JavaScript. So go ahead here and write tasks. We have a syntax error. I don't see any syntax error, but it seems like it's around here. I'm missing the quotation on the end there. Okay, so it's not loading our task page, so we'll just give it a look here. It's always a pain in the butt to get these first pages set up here, the views. So I'm not too worried about it, but we'll just go ahead here and squish this a bit here. And just see what's happening. So it keeps on redirecting, which is a bit frustrating. So we'll make our way back here, and we'll take a look at our routes coffee. You know what? It might just not know about that new file. Sometimes when it's views, I'll stop and start this thing again here. So let's just give that a go and see maybe it just wasn't watching that file. There we go. So yeah, so when you add a new view file, it doesn't necessarily pick it up right away. So we just have to stop and start it. But now it's rendering those individual pages, so I can go here. So what I want to do is create a link between those two pages. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our JavaScripts here. We'll go to home. We'll say my tasks. And we'll render a new component. So we actually have one called link here. And so we're going to pass in link. And then we're going to give it the href here. And we're going to say tasks. This link here, normally we just make an A tag. But the thing is that this link component is part of Mithril. And what it says is that, oh, you want to send yourself, you're going to send the next page to another Mithril page. So don't hard reload the page, just redirect within the JavaScript framework, okay? So I'm going to go back here and refresh on this page. So we have my tasks. I click that, and it goes there. So that looks pretty good. And we'll go back here, and we might as well send this back. So we'll just go here and say go back. And we'll add the link there at the top. And we'll just say href, and we'll do that. And so we'll give that a refresh. We can tell that's our default page. Just to make our lives a little bit easier, I'm going to go back to the application HTML here, wherever it is. It's under views. Layouts, I think we had that there. I'm just going to write not loaded so we know. Or actually, you know what? We'll just write it here. Loading. Okay, that way we'll know if there's something wrong. So clearly there's something wrong, and we can see down below here we have a syntax error. So what we'll do is we'll make our way back to the source, and we'll go into our this issue's in our task index coffee. So we'll go to task index. I'm just missing a comma here. There we go. So my tasks go back. So that looks pretty darn good. So what we'll do is just give it a little bit of styling. So we'll make our way over to our styles. And so that should be in our style sheet directory here. We'll just work in this one directory here. And so I'm just going to say main. Oh, I'll give this a background color. We'll just say 240, 240, 240. And then down below, we'll say main. It really wants to autocomplete to margin. And we will say width 200, background, we'll make it white. Doesn't like that there's 3 there. Not sure I'm not getting my Sass styling. I must not have the Sass plugin installed. Maybe I can go get that really quick here. Quickly install that. There we go. Look at that. That's so much nicer now, eh? And we'll just say margin 0 pixel auto to center it. And maybe we'll give it a margin top here. So we'll just say top. 20 pixels. Give it a nice refresh. And the reason why it's not styling that stuff is because we have this weird thing called computer here. So I'm just going to call this main. And we will go back to our home page as well. Pull that up. And we will also call that main. You know what? We can make that a little bit smaller. You know what? I'm just going to put padding around this. Won't even bother with this. We don't need to do that. There we go. Okay. And we'll just give it a border radius. Border. Solid 1 pixel RGB. 240, or have to make it darker than the background, 220, 220, 220. Give that a refresh here. Okay, so that's looking all right. And so we have a bit of styling here now. And so what we'll do is take a look here. So these pages, right now, this is scoped to location pages home. So normally the way this works is by default, the Dilithium framework is going to look at the name of the actual view. So if your view is called pages home, so we go here, pages home, what it's going to do is it's going to lowercase it, underscore it, and then scope it into location so that we can do styling at a per view level. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to type in the body, location, pages home. And we have that A tag there. There's only one element there. I really hate this autocomplete. And we're just going to give it padding 16 pixels there. So it's a little bit easier to look at there. And also display block. There we go. Great. And so now we'll be on this page. And so let's go ahead and actually build out a component on this page that we want to render out. But probably what we'll do first is actually get the data that we want to work with. So what I want you to do is in the JavaScript here, we have a service that's called API. And we're going to create a route to our resources there. So we're going to type in resources, tasks, true. And this is basically the same as a Rails, like how Rails does routing. So you see here we have resources tasks. That's pretty much the same thing, okay? It's just we're doing it on the JavaScript side here. So now in our actual tasks index coffee, we're going to have to import that API service. So we'll have to say import. And we'll say API from, and that's going to be some services API. And then what we'll need to do here is set an event to listen on. So we'll call that tasks index, and that's going to render out the success, or that's going to return to the success page. And then from here, we want to do a reindex. Reindex automatically gets called on the page. So this is where you would define your API call. So we'll say tasks index. And we actually don't need to pass any parameters, so we won't. And it has a problem here for some reason. Oh, you know, it has to be colon. There we go. And so we'll go back here and give this a refresh. And so we'll inspect the page and see what's going on. So it's saying undefined task. So if I click on there, it's having a problem with the API. So if task is undefined, that means API is undefined. So it has a problem with API up here, okay? So what I'm going to do is just do a console log on this and see why it thinks that API doesn't exist. And it even says down below here, imported API, but was not found, okay? So if something isn't being found, then it probably has to do with the, I mean, it could be the export default, or it could be the issue with our Webpack files. So let's just open up our service API here. And this says class API extends. You know, the problem is there's no default on this. Probably another small problem we'll fix in the CLI there. See, everything's green now, eh? And we'll flip on back here. We'll give it a refresh. And so now we can see that it's actually returning the class, which is good. But now it's complaining about index is undefined. So if I click on here, it's saying API does exist, but tasks doesn't exist. So that's a little bit odd. So what we'll do to debug that is we'll just, we will log this here. Oh, you know what the problem is? Again, it's a problem with this. There's a line missing here. I know what it is. It's supposed to be export defaults API here, and we'll just say new API because it actually hasn't created an API. Okay. So we'll go back here and give this a refresh. And so now we'll just expand here. You can see that we have that task index directory. We didn't have any errors, so it must have called it. We'll go to inspect our page. We're going to go to network. If we scroll on down here, we can see that it's made an API request to our server here. So that's API tasks, and it's returning data. And that data is being sent to success. So success automatically assigns it to @sign model. So if we go back to our task here, I know that we can't see it here, but I'll just show you what it looks like in the back end here. So if we go over to Dilithium here and we go into source, this is view. So view would be under operations. No, yeah, it is right there. And if I was just to open this up here, you can see that on Redux, we have that reindex call. And so it gets called on init. So that's how the application knew how to call it. And then a success function is already defined down here, and it will automatically take whatever data is returned and assign it to model. Now, we don't need to override this, but I'm just going to do it for the sake of this tutorial so you can see. And I'm just going to put data in here. And I'm just going to do console log data. And I'm just going to call the things that are already on here. Okay. Just so you can see that that's how it works. And so we'll go back here, give it a refresh. We'll take a look, and so there's the data. So you can see that the data is being returned, and now we can work with it. So what we'll do is we'll just iterate through that there with that data. And so we are in our task index. So I'm just going to say for task in @sign model, we're going to render that task out. Okay. Task.name. I mean, yeah, that's all we should have to do there. So we'll go ahead and refresh that. And we have an error. So we have an on-property length. It's because @sign model is nil at this point here. And so it doesn't actually have anything. And that's why it's erroring out. So what we can do is just say return unless model. So unless the model is actually set, then don't do that. Okay. Okay, great. So now it's setting there, so we can give that a little bit of styling. So we'll make our way back here to our application. And this page should be scoped on the tasks index here, right? So I go here, it's scoped on there. And so what we'll do is just give that a little bit of styling. We'll just say task, and we'll give that some padding. And we will also... no, I think patterns is fine. We'll give it a border bottom. So we'll go here and we'll give it a border bottom, maybe lighter than the actual one there. So we'll say 240, 240, 240. And we'll also not set it on the last one. Last child, border none. Give that a refresh. There we go. It looks like we have a double line here. I'm not sure why. Just inspect that there quickly. Oh, you know what? Because it's not border bottom. That's why. So it's rendering on the top and the bottom at the same time. There we go. So now we have ourselves a few tasks. And so let's just go ahead and actually have something submit. So, well, actually, before we do that, we should probably refactor out our task into its own component. So instead of having it here, I know it's really small, but once components start building up, it becomes a problem. So I'm going to make a new one here called task. And I'm just going to pass model as in task here. And at the top here, I'm going to just do an import. So I'm going to say import task from components task. And we'll go up here and we'll make a new task. And we'll say task.coffee. And so we need to create a new component here. I'm just going to copy some boilerplate over here because I can never remember it. And from here, I don't need API or those things. I'm going to need component instead here. And M. And so we're just going to place component here. We're going to call that task. And so with components, you have this thing called expects. And this is just a way of validating what gets passed to the actual component. So this thing is going to expect a model, okay? And we're going to call our render function here. And so I'm going to just flip back over here. I'm just going to cut out this task down below. And we're going to paste that in there. And so now we have our task over here. I'm going to slightly modify just so I know that this has actually worked. And also now this is also called model. A lot of times it's a good idea to normalize your code so that it's just, instead of calling it task within task, you call it model. That makes it a little bit more easy to move the code around. And so now what we'll do is we'll go back here and give this a refresh. It should look the same, which is great, but we'll give it an inspect and we'll just see if it actually has item on it. So now it's actually rendering that component there, okay? So let's actually go ahead and be able to submit new tasks. We're not going to use a database, so we're not going to persist anything, but it doesn't hurt to create a new form here. So there's a few different ways that we can do it. I think the way I want to do it is by using a component here. So what we'll do is we'll create ourselves a new component called task form. And we'll call this tasks form. Okay. And in here, this is going to be a component, so we're just going to copy this boilerplate over. And this will be called task form. And so this is going to obviously be a form, so that's what we'll put here. And we want to, on click to submit it, so we'll just do that and make a new function up here called submit. This is on for space. I know it's painful watching me reset that every time, eh? And we'll just give this a submit. And here we're going to say EV prevent default. So the first thing that passes is the event data here. We're going to say return false because we don't want this on-click action to happen. And then from here we can make our API call. So we can say API task create. And from here we'll pass the attributes. So we'll have it to task. And on here we'll actually have a model in here. We don't have one right now. We'll say model.params. Okay. And we'll have a submit button here. Okay. And we will call this submit. And here we will have a value and we'll call this create. All right. So now we have a little bit of this component created here. I'm going to pass the attributes there. So we need to render that onto our page here. So I'll just take task form and we're going to say render up here. Actually, we can't have this here because if we have this here in Coffeescript, we'll only read the last one. And so this won't actually render out. So what we'll do is we'll just put it here. Well, actually, that's where we want it anyway. So I think that's fine. And we probably should wrap these as tasks here. Okay. And so here we need to pass a model. And this model is not the same as this model here. This is actually going to be a model we define in our JavaScript. And I might want to make this a little bit easier just by calling this task so that's a little bit less confusing for you. And so we'll just do that, tasks like that, and then we'll just make a new model. So we'll have to make a new, we'll have to override our constructor. With Coffeescript, you always have to pass in args like this. with the constructor. In the old Coffeescript, you didn't have to, but that's just how it is. It's complaining because we didn't define what model is. I'm going to call it model here right now. And what we're going to do is make ourselves a new task model. We'll have to call this task model here, not to conflict with this task component. And we'll just import that there. And under models here, we'll make a new model. So we'll call that task.coffee. It's saying couldn't resolve it. It's because we didn't make it yet. I'm just going to look at an example here. Again, I can't remember this stuff off the top of my head. I always have a lot of code lying around as an example. So just give me 2 seconds as I just go take a look at a comparative model for me to use here. Okay, there we go. So the first thing we're going to need to do is do an import, and we're going to have to import model and attribute. And we're going to get that from Dilithium. So Dilithium, and I can't type that to save my life. So I'm going to copy paste that in. And so we're going to do an export default, class, task, extends, model, and we're going to define the attributes that are on this model. And we will fix our 2 spacing here so I don't go crazy. And so we're going to want to have a name. We'll just do 1 attribute. We don't have to make things hard on ourselves here. And we'll just call this attribute. And so now we have a model and an attribute for our to work with our form. And so we'll go back to task form here. And we're going to have to use a we're going to need to have something to write in. So what we'll do is we'll import an input text here. And I just want to show you back in the JavaScript framework, there's just common components that we use all the time. And so they're under here, I think, in the sciences. So we have fields. And so we're going to be using this input text here. And all this is this is just a component, okay? So that's what we're actually pulling from. So if you're ever wondering, you just look it up. But I'll go ahead here and just pull in that there. And so we're going to have our fields here. And we are going to use that input text. And I can literally just check what's expected of me. So I need to pass an attribute. Okay, so here we'll have a model and we'll say the attribute is called name. Because remember, our task here, it is assigned to, if I find our model up here, wherever it went, here. Oh, did I call that tasks? That's not right. It has to be called task. Rename, we'll call that task there. And actually, I believe this has to be a function. Sorry. But anyway, so this, when we call task name, it's actually passing back this attribute object here. And so that is what our task form wants to work with. So we'll go back to our task form here. And so, yeah, we're passing model name. We also need to give it a handle. Okay. Handle is the name here. The handle just gets set on, like see here, it sets it here so that we can style it. And it's used for a few other things. We don't have to provide it a label, but we can provide it a placeholder. So in here, we're just going to say, write a new task. We can have an on change event, but we don't need that because we're just going to rely on the manual submission here. Also, let's put up a console log here so that when we do submit, we can see what's going on. Okay. And so that should be it for the form. So let's go take a look here in the application, see how it looks. So there it is, a little bit ugly. So let's give it a little bit of styling. It doesn't hurt to spend a little bit of time on this. And it's usually a good idea, like when you have a component, just to name the top element here based on what it is. So let's just say task form. Makes our lives a little bit easier here. And so we need to go back to our styling here. I'm just going to paste that. I'm going to say tasks form. And we will just do this here. And I'm going to make this display flex. And we might as well make our button look a little bit nice here. So I'm going to say input type submit. And we also have a text field here. So that's going to be text field. And we'll give that a flex grow. one because we want it to take up as much room as possible. Might as well give this a bit of padding here. We'll just say padding 16 pixels here. And the submit, we really want to pretty this up here. So we'll say border radius 4 pixels, border none, outline none, background RGB. We'll just say 200:00. That's going to make it red. That's not a good color. We'll say 140:200. Should be like some kind of turquoise there. We'll give it a color of white. It's actually a bit nicer if we make this white with a bit of transparency. So that's why I put that little A there. And we'll just say 0 point there. We want to center the text within it. So I'm going to say, I'm going to make this a flex object. And we'll just say align items center, justify content center here, okay? And we'll go ahead and give that a refresh. Still kind of ugly. Let's see if that styling is actually getting applied. I mean, it looks like it's kind of getting applied. We have this API issue, that's totally fine. You know why? It's because we didn't define it in our task form up here. So we'll just go grab that from our task index here. Okay. Great. Give that a nice refresh. And let's just go inspect and see why it's not picking up our styling. So we're here. Well, 16, so it's doing that. Oh, it's because it's in fields. Okay, that's fine. I mean, we only have one field, so it's a little bit silly that I did that. It's just out of habit because I always expect I'm going to have more. So I'm just going to pull that up there, give that a refresh. And so that's looking a little bit better. Not as nice as I'd like it to be, so we'll put a little bit more time in here. And we'll just say in here there's a type text. And so we'll give this 100% width. And we'll give this a bit of padding here, 8 pixels. We'll give it a font size of 15 pixels. It's looking a little bit better. Ooh, that outline's not looking good. Outline none. I'm used to working on a Mac, so I don't see this kind of styling, eh? That's okay, I guess. I don't really like the look of that. Our button's having a hard time there. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not sure why that's overflowing. In fact, it doesn't even look like it's a submit. It looks like it's an input text. So we have a little syntax there, that's why. So we'll go back to our task form. Yeah, we're missing the end one here, eh? There we go, that's starting to look a little bit more normal. I don't know why that's bleeding into the other one. It really shouldn't be doing that, so we'll just open that up and we'll give that a nice inspection here. Okay, so that is technically doing the right thing. And this is overshooting. Oh, you know why? It's because their CSS doesn't have border box. Okay, so we'll just say, we'll give it an asterisk there, and we'll say border box, or is it box sizing border box? There we go. Give that a nice refresh. And now it's acting as we expect it to be. Generally, like Flex will automatically expand something to the total height. So I'm really surprised that it's not doing that right now. Because I didn't put an align items on that, eh? Oh, it is, but I think we're styling the interior component, and that's why it's doing that. I guess we don't need that submit. Again, it's out of habit. I'm used to doing more complex forms. So we'll just do that, give that a refresh. Okay, now it's acting how I want it to act. We'll go back to our styling. And we'll give it a little bit more padding here. So to the left and the right, we're not going to do the 0 because it's already centering pretty good here. And we'll just say 16 pixels here. And on the field here, we're just going to give it a padding right, 16 pixels. Okay, that looks all right. Much better. So now, you know, we should be able to do this. And we'll just make sure we have our inspector open. And this should submit to the application here. We are getting a 404 right now. I'm not sure why. We didn't hit submit, so post shouldn't be happening. So I think it's prematurely triggering. It shouldn't because submit is set here. Oh, you know what it is? It's this. I think it's that. Let me just think about that for a second. And I think that the EV would actually be Yeah, no. Let me take 2 seconds to check. It always takes a second here. I'm just checking out some forms I have in my Exampro application here as an example. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I'm using it right. Okay. I don't know, it's tripping me up here. I just thought it was like submitting prematurely, but we'll just go back here and give it the inspect. Maybe we'll do a refresh here because it shouldn't have called form unless I actually called something. You know, as soon as I click on it, it's submitting. Oh, you know what? It's it's not supposed to be on click. It's supposed to be on submit. That totally makes sense, right? Okay, that was my bad. So we'll go back here and we can see that our data is loaded there. And so we should just type in testing 1, 2, 3, hit create. And so it's now firing that off to post. We'll go here. It says 404. That's totally fair because there isn't a post page there or a tasks on there. So we'll go ahead there and we'll go ahead and mock that out really quickly. So go to tasks. Def create, and we'll say render JSON. We'll just assume that it worked and there was no issues. And so, well, actually we get the data here, so I could probably just pass it back. So we're just going to say ID4, name, and we'll just say params, and this is passing back task, and then this should give us a name here. And so now we need to go back to our, not to our task form, but we need to go back to our tasks index. And we just need to add a few more events. So we'll have task create success. And it's always a good habit to have an error here that does something. There actually is a default error in the view. So if we go back to Dilithium here for a moment, and I believe it's on the view. So we go back here and we go to operations, back to view. I think it has a default error. So if an error returns a 403, it's just going to redirect it back to wherever you want it to. If you don't, it's just going to go back to the home directory or the home page there. So what we'll do here is we'll define our create success. Okay. And this is going to have data. We're going to just do console log create success here so we can see what is happening. And I have some utilities here that we can use. I believe these are under, maybe they're under operations, utilities. And so we didn't want to have to include like Lodash or some big library here. So we just have some reusable ones here for create and stuff like that. So what we'll do is we'll go up above here and just import util. And here we'll just type in util create. And all it's going to do is just append, like when you have a create action, it can append or etc. So that's all we're doing here. So we want to get the tasks. That's the first thing we have to pass in here. We have to pass in the collection. And then the data that we want to add here. Again, it's not complicated. It's just if it, you just push it. That's all it's doing. And so we will pass in data here. And so that should do what we want it to do. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, I didn't see anything happen there. We'll give it an inspect. 422, so we had processed unprocessable identity. It's interesting because if it did a 422, it might return, if it's set on the error, I don't think it is. I think it's just set on 403. Because 422 would actually set it, set on something else. Yeah, so we don't have a 422 here. That's why it didn't, it did go to the error page, but there was nothing to act upon. But that's fine. We don't want a 422. We're not here to teach you that today. It's just to get this to work here. It's having issue with invalid authenticity token. This happens in Rails if there is no CSFR token, but I'm pretty sure there is because we have it up here and there's the token. So it's probably not being included into the actual application itself. And that has to do with the service API. So I probably have a way to select it. So what I'm going to do here is just take a look at my Exampro app here, because I probably have like an additional line here to configure it that I just you have to do for apps when you integrate here. But if that was the issue, then why would the other one return? So that's a little bit confusing, but I'm just going to double check anyway here. So services, API. Yep, we do have something. So I guess it's more for posts. I think gets are okay, but posts, they require that CSFR token. So I'm going to paste that in there, and that's going to pass that along. So again, in our Rails application, there was that CSFR token, see up here? So it's grabbing that out and then passing it along in the header. So now if I have to refresh my page here. And so now if I do that, say testing 1, 2, 3. There, it's been added to the bottom. I just want to show you there if we go to tasks and we look at the headers, I think it should pass it in there. The CSFRF token, I just want to show you that. There it is, see? So that's what Rails wants to protect from cross-site scripting or whatever it is. So there you go. So that's all there was to it. And so hopefully you learned something really interesting about Rails and connecting to an application. Rails does have something called Webpacker, but we don't use Webpacker, and it's not a generally good idea to use it because if you do need to decouple your applications, which is something we definitely need to do with our applications, it's one reason why we avoid those kind of things that are built into Rails that make things easy but make it hard to scale. But yeah, there you go.